welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. For a few decades now, one of Australia's greatest unsung musical heroes has been none other than Bryan Estepa. Born in the Philippines before moving to Australia as a child, Bryan has had a storied career as a musician, performing in bands such as Swivel and Hazey Jane before turning his attention towards solo gear. That solo gear first took form under the moniker Adeline before he decided to use his real name around 20 years ago. Since then, he's been a prolific artist, writing and recording frequently and releasing myriad albums in recent decades. For those playing at home, the last time Bryan released a full-length album was back in 2019, with Sometimes I Just Don't Know arriving before an EP called Back to the Middle in 2021. But fast forward to this year and Bryan is back with another record called I See It Now. It's an exceptional piece of work, drenched with clever songwriting, power pop sensibilities, and an immense sense of passion. Truly, it's something worth your time. I've been following Bryan for many years now, but this week I was lucky enough to finally have a chat with the great man about his musical career and that new album of his. Anyway, have a listen to Bryan Estepa's I See It Now, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Bryan Estepa, thank you very much for joining this episode of Trusty Chords.
My pleasure, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
So, for those who might not recognise your name, could you give me a quick few words on who you are and why we're chatting today?
Well, I'm Bryan Estepa. I'm a Sydney singer-songwriter musician. Did I say I'm based in Sydney? Yeah, I'm based in Sydney, but I was originally born in the Philippines, and I migrated to Australia with my family back when I was 8 years old in 1987, and I've been pursuing this rock and roll business since the age of 17, I think now. It's been a while. So, and I'm approaching, mid-century, half century. So, that's me in a nutshell. I'm a singer-songwriter, still plugging away after all these years, as what all my other fellow musician friends in this in this scene are doing.
Well, I'm very glad you are still plugging away and everything, because you definitely make some amazing music. But I guess before we get onto the contemporary music that you are making, what I'd love to do at the start of these podcasts is go back in time to where a love of music first formed. So do you have a recollection of your earliest memory of when music first resonated with you?
I've got two that really stand out. The first one is I grew up in a very, my mother's side is a very musical side. So I remember being young in my house in Manila and hearing my uncles and their friends all gather around the courtyard and just singing along to Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel songs, the Eagles, the Carpenters, John Denver. They just had their acoustic guitars out and singing along. I mean, they were really drunk most of the time, but that was a real lasting memory of me, because I think it was the first time I was sort of introduced to a lot of those artists, and just sort of hearing and seeing the joy that just what music just does for people when, it just connects them in their own way. That's one early memory. Another early memory when I finally moved to Australia was my auntie is married to a Northern Englishman. And by the time I was 9 or 10, I was already obsessed with the Beatles. And when he found that out, it was like, oh, I'm going to adopt this kid. And I used to visit his home in the Central Coast of New South Wales, and he introduced me to a lot of British beat music, because as a teen, he was watching all those, he was watching the Beatles, the Kinks, early Stones, all in that Mersey beat kind of era. He was watching those bands around then, and he had a lot of 7-inches, the original singles. So, and I just rummaged through his collection, and to me, it was like the things I read about in books coming alive, because I was actually seeing vinyl for the first time. And I actually don't remember playing them, but I remember just being amazed at seeing what I heard on cassette tapes and radio on vinyl and the actual original state. So I learned a lot of new bands through my uncle that way. And that was quite influential to think about it now, because it kind of set up my music taste to
That
this
is
day.
really quite amazing though, because I can only imagine that, sort of discovering all these 7 inches, you just sort of thinking
Yeah,
like, holy hell, like there are
yeah,
all these
yeah.
like these myriad names that I've heard of, but they actually have them sort of like in a tangible sense. That must be like it must be wild to actually sort of be able to be within arm's reach of that music, quite literally at arm's reach.
It was, and I actually visited him a couple of years ago, and I, I remember just doing the same thing. I go, Uncle Mike, can I have a look at those records again? So I I took photos of all these records that I remember seeing. But yeah, but from there it was that trigger. It was a trigger for me to start digging into these bands. Like Herman's Hermits, the Kinks, Jerry and the Pacemakers, all those early British bands that are associated with the Beatles and who are my ultimate influence. And then from there things stemmed. Then I ended up discovering the Yardbirds and like stemmed under the 70s music. So I feel like it was such an important discovery for me at such a young age and influential age. I think it was 10 or 11 when I had that experience.
That's
And
also really it's also really amazing just because of the fact that I don't know, like to me I always view bands like Herman's Hermits as sort of being an old band, even
yeah,
if like I mean I'm doing some quick math. I'm assuming you would have been what, like, this is about 1990-ish or something.
yeah, good. Yeah, it was about 89, 90 around
Yeah.
then. I would have
So
been, yeah, I was 11 in 89, I think, and 12 in 90. So
yeah,
yeah, it was around that time.
because
So, and
it
around that
almost
time I was playing guitar. I started to play guitar as well. So
because it almost sort of seems as though even around that time, they were like bands like that were considered somewhat old, and they weren't considered cool again yet. Though it was sort of in that
no.
little lull period. So I guess discovering all this music, and then also starting to get into music. So
Yep.
sort of starting to get into playing music. Was it this discovery of all these sort of bands that made you say, "I want to pick up a guitar," or was it something
Yeah.
separate?
Yeah. No, you're spot on. So as soon as I discovered the Beatles and those kind of music, uh, I wanted to actually play them. I wanted to learn how to play those songs. I wanted to sing them with my mum. I wanted to sing it with whoever. It was just, I feel like it was such a natural extension because I felt like I knew all the words. I memorized all the words. I can every melody, every harmony. But then, I needed something to prompt me to want to actually play the guitar, and that was it. And I wanted to. And there was also in my school in year six there was a guitar group. There was a guitar club that played in church as part because I went to a Catholic school, and I remember peeking in and seeing how cool these cats were. They were playing acoustic guitars and they were singing Beatles songs. And by then I was a half decent player, but I didn't think I was good enough, so I was really shy. So that forced myself to get better really quickly, so I can go in there and not look like a complete dickhead and be able to keep up with them. So, but yeah, absolutely, hearing and discovering those records was a massive trigger in me wanting to really play an instrument, which is guitar in this case.
So when did you start writing your own music then?
Uh, I was 15. I was 15. Oh, my band at the time, we were called Psychedelic Fuzz, my first serious band. We were we were just playing pretty much 60s covers, Cream, Hendrix. Although 95, I was also in the middle of the grunge scene, but I didn't think I was cool enough to play that kind of stuff then. So anyway, that band entered a band competition, similar to youth rock, where bands like Silverchair got their start. And we I wanted to play an original song as part of the 3 song set that we had. So I remember we played Purple Haze when we did Badge by Cream, and then I wrote this song called Don't Leave Me, and it was terrible in a good way. So that was the first time I started writing songs, and yeah, I'm kind of proud of it for a 15-year-old with no life experience. I pretended I knew what heartbreak was and getting left by someone.
Well, I mean, it's sort of all about faking it till you make it, isn't it? Plus, I mean, that's also
Still doing it.
it's also the sort of question that I always love to ask people is because of the fact that whenever I ask them about their earliest musical sort of, I guess, exploits and how they started writing music, like
Mm,
I noticed when I asked you the question, there was a slight smile, and that's always what people tend to do because it's always sort of like, oh God, that early stuff was terrible, and I choose not to remember it.
yeah.
But it's good to know that you sort of look back on it with a little bit of fondness though, because I feel like most people don't have that ability.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I look upon it with fondness because at 15, and I was actually brave enough for some reason to tell the guys in my band, hey, I've got this original song. Let's give it a go and let's play it in front of a couple of hundred people. And but you don't really think. I think at 15, I don't think I was that self-conscious or as self-conscious as I became later on. So to me, it's just part of the whole deal. I got a song. Let's give it a go. And it kind of kick-started that songwriting thing from there.
So obviously, when you were 15 or so, you were in this band, Psychedelic Fuzz. But then, when I
Yeah.
guess the wider public have become aware of you, you're more of a solo artist. So had you been playing in bands and then going into solo music, or how does that sort of like chronology work out?
Yeah. So I ended up. Okay, let me think the history. So after Psychedelic Fuzz, I ended up in another high school band called Rumpus. So that's when we were basically a grunge band, and it was fantastic. We just played everything from Pearl Jam to early Nirvana to Silverchair, stuff that the music of the time, and we wanted to play it for our friends. Then after that, I ended up playing bass in a band called Wygal. Funny name, but it was just hard rock band influenced by Mike Patton to Pearl Jam to Guns N' Roses. It was a really weird kind of mix. Then in 2000, I came back from a stint working in the States, and I decided that I wanted. Oh no, I missed the big part out there. I was in a band called Swivel from 98 to about 2000, and we were this power pop punk band uh, playing at the Hoey and the Annandale. So that was really important. That was probably my most important band at that time because I was starting to be part of the Sydney
Yeah.
pub scene. And then after that, that's when I went solo. But I didn't play under my name for a long time. I played under the name Adeline after an Elliott Smith song. So yeah, then in 2006 is when I finally had the guts to release something under my own name, which was my first album, All the Bells and Whistles.
And I guess, how was that experience for you? Because I mean, going from being in bands and then I guess, also performing under like a different name, but then putting yourself out there, that's a little bit of a big step. Like to sort of be completely without any sort of, I guess, facade, for lack of a better word. That must be a little bit difficult. So how did that go for you? Was it enjoyable experience or was it a bit daunting?
It was a bit of both. Like I said, I had no I wanted to be that I wanted to be kind of anonymous when I first started. And so not play under my name like Eel and a few other people, Lamb Chop, those kind of guys that I was already enjoying around that time, but didn't play under their name. And because I didn't have the confidence yet to reveal myself, I said I chose that pseudonym Adeline. It was a way I was creating my own facade, really. I was trying to
Yeah.
hide a bit, and then so yeah, that was good because it gave me a chance to learn and experiment, and it was a great time. And still not fall flat if it's under my own name. But once that whole Adeline experience, you know, was successful in my own measurement, then that's when I decided that I should play under my own name, and I was sort of getting a little bit better at the songwriting craft as well.
So when you actually started, you know, performing, I guess, as Adeline and everything, and then
Yeah,
as yourself, was there a specific sound in mind that you wanted the world to hear? Because coming from these sort of different bands where you're playing music that's sort of like grungy, power pop, a bit
yeah,
psychedelic, obviously what we sort of hear, like even today, it's very different because, I listen to your work and I hear elements of power pop. Like, I'm
yes,
reminded of bands like Big Star, for example.
yeah,
And
spot on. Yeah.
then there's a lot more indie stuff, and I'm sort of reminded of acts like
Mm,
Wilco. But was
yeah.
that your sort of plan from the start, or did that sort of evolve a little bit as things went on?
I think we're all natural products of our influences. And at that time, in during the Adeline days, I was well into the alt country slash power pop sort of world. So bands like Wilco, Jayhawks, Big Star, Raspberries, Sloan, UMI, obviously as well. People who know me know I'm a massive UMI guy. So I was trying to because I'm still trying to find my sound. So all those things were coming together to produce, what Adeline was. And so yeah, I do. I wanted that, meat and potatoes rock and roll on stage, to electric guitars, bass, drums, keys, three-part harmonies. So I was aping in many ways those bands that I loved. But I think that's how you kind of learn. because eventually you'll start to skewer away from that sound, and eventually you start finding other things that interest you sound wise and songwriting wise, and hopefully you start develop your own sort of sound.
Because you like you mentioned just then about how you were trying to define your sound, but I guess when you look at yourself now, how do you define your sound? Is there a way that you can sort of, is there an elevator pitch you can give to someone when they say, "What do you sound like?"
I get asked that a lot, and right now I think I'm just. It's hard because I can just say I'm a singer songwriter, but most of my songs, like you've said, they're very guitar pop influenced, and the biggest thing for me is just I love a good hook, I love a good melody, and I'm getting better, I think, with writing phrases and lyrically, becoming a bit more. I don't know. I wouldn't say clever, but a lot more honest as well. So yeah, I just like to say I'm a singer songwriter with a big bend towards guitar pop. You know, the classic, the classic hooks and big melodies.
Yeah. I mean, I also sort of just like there how you were saying like, you're like always trying to get better or something. I mean, like I like to view music as a case of every day's a school day. You're always learning something a little bit
That's
more. But then but
100%.
at the same time though, I feel like I mean, I don't know if you'd be the same, but as someone who has like such lofty influences, I mean, acts like Big Star, for example. We mentioned Elliott Smith before.
Mm.
I mean, as
Yep.
someone who also writes my own music, I tend to always find that I'm always sort of like comparing myself to all of the greats, and I'm just sort of like, yeah, this isn't good enough. So it's sort of like, sure, while I'm striving to be better, I always feel like there is, like I feel like most people would sort of say better is not any sort of countable thing. You can always get better, but I feel like you're always aiming for something. Do you feel like you're always aiming for something, or do you sort of feel like you can just sort of continuously get better? Not that you need to get better. I should point
Well,
that out, but yeah.
no, no, you raise some good points because I think as musicians, I think we're giving showing ourselves a disservice by not wanting to get better. Um, you want to get better in your craft, whether it's you're a drummer, you're a keyboard player, a songwriter, your performance live on stage. If we're still in the same level as what we were 20 years ago, then I don't know. I feel like we've wasted these years, and hopefully the cumulative experiences and you've had in studio live and by yourself learning your craft will make you a better musician. So I think um, part of that, you getting better as a songwriter, is not just influenced by the people that you love and who touch you in your soul in in deeper ways. It's also how you being able to perform it, being able to do it. So I think it's natural to always compare our music to the people we love. Like to me, I'm still I'd love to record an album as good as like Hi-Fi Way, or an album as great as um what's that album called? Sky Blue Sky, by Wilco. Or to write songs like Jeff Tweedy, or to have a clever turn of phrase like Tim Rogers. I think it's always going to be part of us as songwriters. We have to have a bar set high, something to look up towards. Yeah. Yeah.
I last interviewed Tim Rogers back in I think December, and I think the one thing I said to him was like, I think if anyone wants to sound like you need to start using phrases like lugubrious all the time, and he was just like, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds about right.
And,
But
and he's one of the few Australian songwriters that can make Australian towns or city landscapes sound romantic. Like who uses Ulladulla in their songs? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Glee
it's very
Point
ambitious.
Bridge, Circular Quay. I mean, that blew my mind. That blew my mind as when I first heard albums like Hi-Fi Way and hearing, "Wow, he just used Circular Quay," or he just used, very Aussie phrases. And yeah, so, but that's distinct to him. That's his personality coming out. So he's that's a very genuine songwriting, very honest songwriting style. It's not him aping anyone, and his influences, but influenced by guys like Guy Clark and Ray Davis kind of thing. But ultimately, he's created by the sounds that he grew up around hearing, the sounds that he grew up hearing, and the people around him, and who he is as an Australian. I think so.
Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, I'm sure we could talk all day about Tim Rogers, and I'm sure we'll touch on him again at some point. But I guess the reason that we're also chatting today is due to a recently released album. I see it now. So first
Yeah,
off, it's a stellar piece of work, and it's got a gorgeous
thank you.
feel about it. But I guess I want to go back in time briefly first because your previous album was 6 years ago with Sometimes I
Mm,
Just Don't Know. So there was
yeah,
some music in between that, such as the Back to the Middle EP. And I think there's also a compilation of the Adeline stuff as well that came out on
yeah, that's
Spotify.
right. Yeah.
But I guess talk me through this gap. Why has it been so long between full length records? And if the answer is simply COVID, then I retract my question.
Well, COVID had something to do with it because obviously the album came out in 2019. It came out late 2019, and I had, like most musicians in that year who released music or who are working musicians, I had plans to tour that album. I had plans to, yeah, basically just to tour it. But then the world kind of stopped, as we all know. And that album also, I think, also went through for a year or two after that, like normal with me. Once I've written an album, written a bunch of songs, I normally go through a massive drought. And that sometimes Just I Know was quite an emotionally heavy album for me to write and record. Um, so I think I needed to just to step back a bit and just restock, so to speak. Um, but as usual, you get inspired and you meet people and you work with people that brings great things out of you. Hopefully, back to the middle, you mentioned I worked with Josh Pike with that one, and so he kind of brought a lot of um, the indie leanings that I have, which is great. And then yeah, like I said, I re-released some old CD songs that I had back in early 2000s, and I released a couple of singles. Then the new album kind of came out of nowhere, really, like last year. Um, the songwriting gods was kind to me for a little period there, and I just ran with it.
Because you obviously mentioned before that so I just forgot the name of it. Sometimes I just don't know. Saying how that was
Yeah,
a little bit sort of emotionally heavy and a bit sort of I guess
yeah,
draining. So was the
yeah,
experience of this most recent album was that a bit more positive? I guess.
yeah, absolutely. It was a lot. I mean, there was still, thematically with the album, there's still, sadness but I think there's a lot more hope and silver linings and clarity with this record. So yeah, it was I wouldn't say the complete opposite to Sometimes I Just Don't Know, but I felt like I was sort of answering doubts and questions that I had in that album, and sort of yeah, moving forward with this record. And because of that, it was a really different but also a joyful experience to record.
Because I also like that you use the word clarity because I mean even just the title saying I see it now, like I'm instantly
Yeah.
sort of reminded of like the song I can see clearly now the rain is gone, and there's that sense of clarity. And I guess that is I mean it's a very nice sort of way to be feeling. And I
Mm,
guess you also mentioned it was an enjoyable process because my next question was going to be what was the recording of the album like, because you're again working with some very talented musicians, but you've also been doing this for many
mm.
years now. So I guess was it an easy process for you, or do you still go into the like recording process thinking like, what am I going to learn? What's going to come out? I don't know what I'm doing.
This was completely different, Tyler. I So the record is produced by Javi or JJ Extramira, who's a great mate of mine and a Spanish music producer based in Barcelona. So we started the record back in October last year, October 2024, in his studio. And then from there, I went back. I did as much as I can there. Then I went back home and I started writing the rest of the songs. I'd send him demos, and then we'd work on it together. So we were working with the time difference and working with making an album where I'm not physically with the people for 80% of the record. So that was really fun. So it's essentially a big collaboration between myself and Harvey, but then the rest of my Spanish touring band were a massive part of this record as well. So once we've nailed all the demos, then we started tracking them, in the big studios in Barcelona, and I was tracking them here in Sydney as well, studio in Marrickville. So that was completely different because normally I'm in the same room. Sometimes Just Don't Know was recorded in a very live setting here in Sydney and in the Blue Mountains. So I had everyone around me, like we were in a rehearsal studio, tracking them live, and you get to feel what the music is like and vibe off each other. But with this one, it was a different experience. But I think I liked it. I liked it. I changed things up, which is good for me.
So is it a method that you might try again sort of going forward, or do you prefer the what's the tried and true tested way?
I think I'll try it again. It just depends on the circumstance. I think during COVID time, that was the norm, where people, and because of technology, you can just bounce files around to each other, and everyone's got a laptop, everyone's got Pro Tools or something equivalent. But I think there's nothing beats. I'm a traditionalist in many ways too. Nothing beats being in the same room, or at least
Yeah.
being there with the people that are, tracking those records. And a lot of the records that I love, especially from the 70s and 60s, they were all tracked in the same room, by great musicians, responding to the songwriter, the producer, to the singer in real time. And I love that. But again, with I See It Now, I love the way that we made it, because it was such a departure to how I normally would make a record. And I think I needed that for my own creativity to change things around a bit.
And I guess one question I always love to ask folks when it comes to new albums is this one, and that is, what does an album like this say about who Bryan Estepa is in 2025?
Uh, what does this album say about me? I think I think you see someone hopefully matured, a bit more wisdom.
Finally grown up.
Yeah, I think it's just, yeah. Someone said it's very. One of my good friends said it. Yeah, it's a very grown up album from you, Brian. Very mature, and I'll take that as a compliment, because I think you as you evolve as a person, as a human being, I think that affects anything you do creatively, or your creativity. So um, yeah, and I'm pretty honest, and I'm pretty transparent with my lyrics and my records. I don't explain everything, but hopefully people connect with it in some way and make it their own, give their own, have their own interpretation of it. But yeah, just I think a record that's reflection of who I am now.
Sure. And there's also some live dates going on. Is that the case as well?
Live
Yeah,
shows.
your live shows,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. There's the Sydney album launches on August 2 at Django Bar Camelot in Marrickville. That's sold out. Thank goodness. It's always scary as a independent artist to have a ticketed show. So thank you, and I'm grateful to everyone who's pre-bought tickets. A couple of shows in Sydney, a couple of shows in Melbourne on August 23 to launch it there as well, at the Union Bar in Brunswick with Cold Irons Mound, and sorry, I forgot the name. Just Field Momentum. I think they're called. They're a great band. So I mix up Field and Momentum sometimes. So I apologize to if you're listening. And a couple more Sydney shows, and hopefully a big show in December, which I can't reveal yet. We're just working on the details, but it's with a pretty important, well, to me, a very important Australian indie band. So
Well,
yeah,
it's
can't
always
wait to
very
announce that.
nice. It's always very nice to see someone who has read the press release, and I'd like to give a bit of sizzle to the promo trail as well. So we've got something to look forward to for later in the year.
Yeah, it's
Um,
gonna be fun, man.
Well, I think let's get down to the portion of the podcast from which its namesake is derived. So, trusty chords sees me follow the 1, 3, and 5 structure of a standard chord, and I ask about one artist that's been impactful, 3 albums that have been influential, and 5 songs you can turn to. So it's a bit wordy, but you've also been able to give me your answers ahead of time, which I always love. So, but I'll get you to sort of go through them as I ask the question. So my first question for you here, Brian, who is the one artist that has inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
Well, inspired me the most. Normally, I'd say 99% of interviews, I'd say the Beatles, but I'm gonna move away from that, and I'm gonna go to when I realized when my songwriting, I really wanted to get better as a songwriter, and when I discovered Elliott Smith, it was just such a big light bulb moment for me, and only because he married and combined a lot of the influences that I love already, from the indie side to the traditional Beatles side to this production. And there's something about his songwriting and his voice that just absolutely destroys me, even to this day. And I I was like, I think I mentioned before, I worked in the US for a couple of months. I was working in a summer camp as a music teacher. And and back then it was 2000, and I went into this in the bush in Maine in the US, and all I had was my Walkman, and had one cassette that I brought with me from Australia. One side had Either Or, by Elliott Smith, and the other side was EXO. So for 3 months, that's all I listened to every night, and I never got sick of it. And something revealed every song revealed something different with each listen, and there was just something about Elliott, from his guitar playing to his songwriting to his voice to his arrangements, that just spoke to me like no one else at that point. So I'm not sure. I'm sure you're an Elliott Smith fan, but
Absolutely, yeah.
I guess hopefully, I think a lot of people have that same experience when they discover his music. And I felt like I was the only one in the middle of the bush listening to that music. I felt like I was the only one that knew Elliott Smith, and he was my special, discovery at that time.
Were you one of the lucky few who were able to see him when he visited Australia, the one and only time?
No, that's a sad story. I missed out. I was rehearsing. I had a show that night as well. I remember being he was playing with youth group, and my good friend Jason Walker was supporting them. I believe I was part of the group, and I remember being invited to that show. And I didn't go, but I did get to see him in LA in 2000. And I don't. My memories are very vague though. Yeah, my memories are very vague though, because I was I was quite drunkard during that night. So that's one of my big regrets, that I wasn't sober enough to really truly enjoy and remember that show. But I still got his records.
And I guess that's a
So,
very nice segue to the next question, which is
yeah,
the three albums that have impacted the most, because the first one that you've chosen is Either Or. So
yeah.
what is it about Either Or that really, that really stands out to you as opposed to the likes of XO or anything else?
Mm. It's the sparseness of the arrangement. I think about this a lot, because I've been trying to recreate that sound that Elliot had on Either Or. It's basically a record with just drums, bass, acoustic guitar, and electric, obviously, but nothing. There's no other extra instrumentation, and the quietness in his voice made the lyrics uh, push up to the forefront. Uh, the sound feels like it was recorded. Maybe it was. It feels like it was recorded in the lounge room or a really small space. So that intimacy. I felt like I was sitting in a couch. Whenever I listen to the record, I feel like I'm sitting in a couch, and Elliot and his band is right in front of me, playing and singing these songs just to me. And to me, that's a mark of a good record, when it feels like the artist is speaking directly at you with these songs, and they're just beautiful between the bars. Um, oh God, they're not same song titles are escaping me, but there was just something about that record, the way it sounds, that just absolutely got me hook, line, and sinker.
There's
Still to this day.
there's something just so powerful about the way that he just has this amazing command of being able to sort of shock you by doing so little, but he's doing so much at the same
Yes.
time. Like I, I,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but in recent months, I've been seeing it pop up a little bit online. But there's a clip of Elliot on a US TV show back in '95, and he's
Mm.
and he
Yep.
plays Clementine, and
Oh,
it's clearly one of those sort of morning TV shows where it's all sort of like everyone's having a fun time. They've got puppets going on, and then
yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
yeah, and then it's just like he starts playing, and even the puppets' mouths are sort of open, like whoever's doing it, like the puppets are shocked, and I find that to be such an amazing thing where he's able to turn what is supposed to be a bit of a fun house into this sort of moment of solemn, quiet reflection, and I feel like no one but him could do that.
Well, he brought them into his world. He was in this. It's like his experience in the Oscars. He was completely out of his element, out of his comfort zone. Same thing with that TV show. I remember watching that too, and just seeing how the host probably looked at him. He looked like, some, I wouldn't say homeless, but he wasn't dressed up. He just looked like some sad singer songwriter. But then as soon as he started singing and started strumming his guitar, and he's an amazing guitar player too, by the way. Um, yeah, he just got them, and I think that's a great songwriter will bring you into his world, and that's what he did. And I strive, like what you said about comparing yourself to your songs and what you write to others. That's my bar. Someone like Elliot who can write songs and bring you into his world, and everything else gets forgotten. And that's what happened in that video. You see it. You see everyone just going, "The fuck just happened? Who are we watching here?" And I love that. Yeah.
And I guess that's a very good opportunity to make a very terrible pun, because there are high bars, there are low bars, and we will all sit between the bars. But
Between the bars, that's the song. Oh,
yes,
and Goodwill Hunting. Goodwill Hunting. Sorry,
yes,
just going back
of course.
to Elliott Smith. He's I love music that can really elevate a movie as well. And when I first watched Goodwill Hunting, and they used like Between the Bars, and those kind of songs, it was just wow! Isn't that perfect? It was just perfect for that movie and for the scene. Same thing with Garden State. Like when I first discovered bands like the Shins, and and hearing Colin Hay doing "I Don't Think I'm Ever Gonna Get Over You," that song. Those songs are, again, they pull you into their world, and they they just hook you as a fan for life.
Absolutely. I
And
mean, I
that's
could
what's
talk
great about
about
it.
the Garden State soundtrack for hours. It is such a beautiful
That's a
soundtrack as well.
podcast on its own, Tyler, I reckon.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a whole concert on its own just a few months ago when they did like the
Was there?
20th. Yeah, they did like a 20th anniversary where they got most of the artists, like not Simon and Garfunkel, for example,
Yeah,
in
listen,
LA to come out and actually play all the songs from the soundtrack. And
that's terrific.
I think a few of the artists hadn't played live in years, and they got them like reunited for it. I think, yeah, Colin Hay was there and
Mm.
all that sort of thing.
Oh man, love
Yeah,
Colin.
it would have been amazing. But I
Absolutely.
guess on that topic of great songwriters, the next one we have it's an album by the Beatles, and it's their fourth album, Beatles for Sale.
Yeah.
So why the Beatles for Sale? Because I feel like this one doesn't really get brought up in the conversation of the Beatles' great albums.
Well, I the first album I fell for was the Red Album, because it was the Red Album, the first, I think, 1963 to 1965 or 66. Because that had all the hits from Me to You, Love Me Do, She Loves You. So that's when I fell in love with the Beatles and just got completely obsessed. But was Meet the uh, it was Meet the Beatles when I started to see a different side to their songwriting, especially when you got songs like I'm a Loser, No Reply. And it was that Lennon especially, I think, shines in this record because you start to see his personality and that innate sadness that he had in him as well, that insecurity. And as a 12, 13-year-old, it's like something, oh wow, this adult doesn't have all his shit together. And is yeah, and it was weird. I was thinking, what? It's not, is there anything that you want? He wasn't happy. I'm a loser and I lost someone that's near to me. Things like that. It was so vulnerable. And as a 12, 13-year-old, hearing that for the first time, thinking all adults were invincible and just stoic and have everything together, then to hear one of my heroes singing how he needs help and he's insecure and he doesn't, it really spoke to me as a young teen. So yeah, that's why I chose it. And the arrangements are great and the harmonies, everything, but it was the lyrical side. And just, I didn't expect that from the Beatles, the early Beatles, the bubbly Beatles that I first fell in love with. And then that hit me. It's like, wow. Then
Absolutely.
Robert Soul, then it was game over.
And I think I'm just actually trying to look at the track listing of the next album, which was Help. But I mean, I think yeah,
Oh,
it was. What I was going to say, it was Meet the Beatles, which sort of had some of their last ones where they were focusing on the covers as well, which had like rock and roll music on there and
yeah,
things like that.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
I feel like that's a great album that sort of shows both sides of them, where it's sort of showing what they're
Mm.
capable of and also where they're coming from, and it's a great transitionary record, I feel.
That's a great way to put it, actually, transition, because I think that's when I think maybe they were starting to get a little bit jaded with the whole Beatlemania thing too. They were starting to get more introverted, and I think in many, from what I can tell, John was essentially a very shy person, but that's false bravado he put on was to hide that insecurity. And you had George, who's naturally a shy person as well, but very dry sense of humor. Then you had the two bubbly ones in Ringo and Paul. Is that balance? But and that personality came out to me in that album for the first time, and it was such a important moment for me. I think just to realize that as adults we don't all have it together,
Yeah, there is a
or
sense
adults don't
of
have it all together. And
there is a
yeah,
sense of fallibility to us all, and it's nice to know that
mm.
yeah, we aren't alone. Like we can fail, we can all be losers, and who would have thought John Lennon would be a loser? Um,
Even our heroes can say that. Can admit
exactly.
to it. I love that.
And I guess speaking of heroes, and you mentioned personalities before, our the third album we have is UMI, and it's
Yeah.
their second album, Hi-Fi Way. Now, stunning album,
Mm.
absolutely brilliant. I think it was their first number one on the Aussie charts, I believe.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
was Sound as Ever number one? I'm actually going to
I don't
quickly
think
have a.
San Jose was number one. It might have been number one in the indie charts,
Oh, it
but
certainly, yeah,
the
actually, it
Australian,
certainly didn't get number one. It was 56. I'm way off. So yes, it was Hi-Fi Way was their first number one. So what was it about
yeah,
Hi-Fi Way that really spoke to you?
it was the from the very opening. There's that opening drum beat. What's the song again? Sorry, I've forgotten the song. I'm terrible with song. Yeah, Ain't Got an Open. It had me, and then uh, well, just to back it up a bit, I Sound the Servo, Berlin Chair was probably my first exposure to UMI. So I knew them first as that heavier grunge influence band. My year nine teacher, my year nine commerce teacher, actually lent me a single the on a cardboard, the old cardboard singles used to have. So yeah, but then that I started with UMI with that heavier sound. Then Hi-Fi Way came out, and it just again spoke like any great album. It spoke to me from the very first, like I said, from the very first note, from the very first drum beat. There was the sound about there's that sound as well. There's that I want to say slow-fi. I want to say slow-fi, but it just it just captured a sound that I've never heard from an Australian record up to that point. And then obviously the songs, you know, Purple Sneakers. Oh my god, yeah. A song about him again, his insecurity about wearing purple shoes, in Australian primary school. I mean, I learned the history later on. At that time, I just thought, wow, Purple Sneakers, what a great title. Ain't Got an Open, Minor Bird. It mixed a lot of the rock, the indie rock that I love from them. But then I think that's when Tim's songwriting went to another level as well. He started, he started relating more to people around him. He's a great observer, of uh, telling stories of other people from his perspective. So just really, really spoke to me in that way. And around after that too, I remember watching them at Selena's. They played this amazing show at Selena's, and I remember coming out of that in such a massive high and thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to play. I want to keep going with this rock and roll thing, whether it makes me money or it sends me broke or I lose things along the way and people along the way. But it's just something magical. And seeing these three guys at the time, they're world class. They're up there with some of the best in the world, like artists that I love, and they're from my hometown. They're from Sydney. You know,
Honestly, it's like I always feel that they're one of those bands that should have been so much more internationally famous than they were.
yeah,
I know that bands like Powderfinger, I think around the time of 9/11, they were on the cusp of
mm,
like breaking through, going to be touring with Coldplay and
yeah,
everything. But I always feel as
mm,
though UMI sort of, I mean, no disrespect to Powderfinger, but I feel like that mantle should have been given to UMI because they feel I don't want to say the phrase they feel more deserving of it, but they feel
yeah.
more like a band that I would much rather have sort of representing Australia because
No,
they seem to have that much more of a sense of like great songwriting, but with a little bit of like that gritty suburban life as well, which it feels so much more real. And I mean again to like you mentioned Purple Sneakers, who would have the idea of rhyming the words like itch with bridge like that's brilliant songwriting right there. It's
that's
so
clever.
simple as well, but it's one of those
And
things
again, like
where yeah.
I was just saying, like, and using Australian landmarks, Glebe Point Bridge. I mean, there's no real Glebe Point Bridge, but wow, Glebe in a song. You used that suburb that I drive past on the on the way to the city, and songs like "How Much Is Enough" still has that emotional impact to this day for me. And when I hear that live, I've had gigs, my gigs where I've wept during that song, and I know it's coming. It's always towards the end, you know. And I think I'm probably gonna have that moment with Champagne Supernova when I see Oasis later on. But that's a different story. I mean, it's the Oasis mania right now in July 2025. But yeah, there's just something about UMI's music again, similar to Elliot's, that just cut me to the core, and it influenced so much of what I do now. Me as a musician, me wanting to still play live, and um, having that experience of playing with the guys around you. And that's one thing I love about that band. They love each other. they love each other's playing, and it shows. There's so much respect amongst each other, and yeah, that you can't. How can you not be inspired by that?
I'm also really glad that you picked this album because I mean, for the longest time, like I've always enjoyed the album, but I think for the longest time, it never really clicked with me in the same way that many people do. And honestly, it didn't actually click with me properly until earlier this year when I actually interviewed both Tim
Oh,
and
really?
Rusty for its anniversary and
Mm,
its reissue and everything. And like I've interviewed Tim numerous times, and he's always such a champion to talk to. But it's like hearing him
yeah.
contextualize it and sort of talk about the experiences. I was suddenly listening to it with a
Mm,
different light, and I was just like, shit, this is actually it's taken it from like a 9 to a 10 in my mind. And it's yeah, I appreciate it so much more now, and I'm so glad you mentioned it because it gives me another chance to go and listen to it after this podcast. So I'm very thankful, very grateful.
well, that's what again. Like, that's what great records again do. They reveal something different with each listen, or maybe you need a couple of years to get it, to get that artist. And I've got so many artists that is like that with me, where it took me to some life being lived or experiences to understand where they're coming from, and and again, that's also something I aspire to with my records. I'm hoping that it's, I wouldn't say slow burn, but I'm hoping that when people discover it or they listen to it more, that they they get something different each time, or they discover something different. And again, that's a cue from my heroes, from these records that I love, like Hi-Fi Way. Yeah.
And then I guess we should go into the last part here, which is this the songs you can always turn to. Now, the first one we have on here
Mm.
is definitely an artist that a lot of people consider a hero. It's Jeff Buckley, and
Yeah.
it's a song Mojo Pin. So
Mm.
brilliant song, and admittedly, it actually took me a long time to hear this song. I actually didn't hear it till I was working at Woolworths, and I heard it over the PA one day, and I thought, "What the hell is this? This is amazing!"
Woolies in the
Yeah,
PA.
yeah, because I don't know why. Like when it came to Grace, I seem to only ever listen to the singles or the popular ones. I never
What
listened to
what
it in
what
full.
department were you working at? Well, Mojo Pin came on.
Well, actually, I was actually in the like the back, like the locker room sort of thing, finishing off my
Okay.
shift when
Okay.
it played. So I
Okay.
I got a chance to take a moment because I was usually working the checkout. I was in the checkout, like yeah, management side of things and everything. But brilliant, brilliant song, Mojo Pin. Why does this one speak to you so
Mm.
much?
It was, well, I first discovered Jeff during, it was like 95 or 90, yeah, 90, about 95, and I was going through a massive big punk phase, like all teenage kids around that time. I was into Mill and Colin and Pennywise and that kind of bands. So I remember reading press about Jeff and about his song called Eternal Now, and people were saying, "Oh, this is a great punk song. It's got punk leanings." So I went, "Yes, let me look into that." I remember buying the record. I remember buying Grace, and I put it on, and I said, "This is not punk. What is this?" It opened with is it Mojo Pin it opens with, or I can't remember the opening song again, but it just, this isn't punk. I just didn't get it, and until I skipped to finally to Eternal Now, and then okay, I kind of heard a little bit of that heavy guitar work. So one of those records I put aside for a couple of months. I just didn't get it. I go, this is not punk. Then I finally put it on, and then I listened to it once. Okay, that's great. I listened to it again, getting better. And the third listen, there's a part in Mojo Pin where Jeff's voice goes to this, I don't know, this level, this to somewhere in outer space. He just lifts it up, and I was just, wow, what did I just hear? I could not believe what I just heard. I was just transported again, and that was it. And then I got it. I understood it. And then I dug into the production, to the, yeah. That was it. That was it. That was that point in Mojo Pin towards the end of the song. Wait in the fire, wait in the fire, and he starts singing all these, and then he became my favorite singer from that point, and he just, and songwriter as well.
I definitely feel like
Yeah.
we must have had like a very similar experience on that front because I think that was also part of the reason why I didn't like Grace at first. It's because like I was hearing songs like "Love You Should Have Come On Over" or "Last Goodbye," and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, sure, they're good, but I'm in the market for something a little bit heavier, and I never really
Yes.
listened to much of it. But then yeah, hearing songs like "Eternal Life" or "Mojo Pin," you just suddenly like, wow, actually there is so much more to it that I could be listening to and appreciating. And yeah, it was that moment where his voice really goes like to that supersonic sort of point and it
That's
transports you.
that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
I can, but it was just. But then you really then you listen to it, and the depth in his songwriting. Like I said, you're going from, Love You Should Have Come Over to, you know, making Hallelujah his own, Grace, Last Goodbye. And I love that film clip, The Last Goodbye, to the point where I kind of aped it with one of my film clips called Trick of the Light, where I just wanted that lo-fi, look straight out of video, Betamax or, VHS look. And his voice, his singing. I don't think I've ever heard a singer in that way, sing that way that he does, where he just reaches into your gut and just rips it out, and he seems so effortless the way he sings. Then you look closely at his live videos, and he's an amazing guitar player. People forget he was a Guitar Institute student. He was a shredder back in his day, and he made me want to own a telly. Whilst before I thought telly wasn't cool. He was the reason why I wanted to have a telly, and to this day I'm a telly guy.
Yeah, same here.
Um,
Right behind me, I've
yeah,
got one there. Yeah.
oh man, I can pull out my tellies. We can do that later. But yeah, it was just, to me, it was just a complete package, and he just, still to this day, I still remember the day that Triple J announced that he's gone missing. That he was in Memphis River and he's gone missing, and I remember talking to my sister and going, "They can't find Jeff. What is happening?" And he was probably, besides Kurt Cobain, he was the first, probably, the other artist that hit me really hard. It was part of my generation, our generation, who passed away. It wasn't like Brian Wilson, who I've loved for so long, but he was obviously from a different generation to us. But he was part of this generation that I felt like he was one of ours. Then he was gone
Yeah.
too soon, way too soon. So
I've sadly been to Memphis a few times because my wife is a major Elvis fan, and her also being American, we end up just in the States a lot.
mm,
But yeah, last time I was in Memphis, I definitely took a moment to sort of actually like visit the river and everything, and just sort of
oh, you did.
pay my
What was that
respects
like?
basically. Creepy in a way, because you're sort of just
Yeah.
like, this is like, it's, well, it was much like when I visited Sun Studios in Memphis, and I was sort
Mm,
of like, wow, if not for a room like this, I probably wouldn't be doing the job that I'm doing. Like, this is like, for a
love
lot of
that.
people, where music sort of came from. And it's like, to
Yeah.
visit a spot where someone like Jeff Buckley passed away, and you're sort of like, wow, this is another place where music changed. Like, who's to say
Mm,
what music would be like if this river wasn't here?
yeah.
And then I could get
No, I
into a
agree.
huge philosophical thing of damn this river and things like that. But
But what a
it's no longer
legacy.
possible. Yeah.
But what a legacy, though. Just thought one studio album and you leave the world with grace. I mean, if I was to go that early, if I can leave even just, even with just one song like Mojo Pin, or Last Goodbye, that's legacy well and truly locked in the way you want it to be. So yeah. So that's my Mojo Pin experience.
Yeah. Well, I think let's lift the mood a little bit by talking about another great songwriter, because we've got Tropical
Yeah.
Fuckstorm here. And
Oh, yeah.
now I'm very glad you picked this song, because this is easily my favorite Tropical Fuckstorm song. You Let My Tires Down. Like,
My
just
God.
just
I
the mere mention of this song just makes me sort of feel like, yeah, we're in for a good, a good time when this song comes on.
it in live. I think My friend James introduced me to Tropical Fuckstorm because I knew Gareth from the Drones, but the Drones didn't hit me as much as I like the Drones, but I wasn't. Yeah, I just wasn't fully uh, part of that Drones mania. Like a lot of my friends just really love the Drones. Then I heard that song, "Let My Tires Down." I think I might have seen something maybe on Rage, but my friend James, like I said, introduced me to it, and then when I saw them live, was game over. That was so visceral, um, and the way Glenn's body contorts with every lyric, his guitar, and there's the way he treats his guitar and uses it as an extension of the song. I know it is literally, but something about it becomes part of him. The way he plays, the way he'll throw the guitar around, and while that's happening, you have these three other amazing musicians in the back, three amazing female musicians, and just lifting up this music. And you can't, one of those bands that you can't take your eyes off. I don't know if it's just me, but I cannot. It's like, I don't want to miss a second. Something's going to happen at any point with this band. And that song, "You Let My Tires Down," man, that's just unbelievable.
I mean,
Unbelievable song.
I do have to admit, sadly, I haven't seen Tropical Fuckstorm yet. But I mean, I've interviewed Gareth in the past, and I have seen the drones.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the drones actually at the very last big day out in Adelaide, and all I remember thinking
Oh, wow.
is, there's like 20 people here. Isn't this one of
Mm.
Australia's best bands? Why is no one here? And I just remember thinking that, and then actually seeing where they've, well, I guess when I say where they've gone, where the band has sort of evolved into, and we've now got Tropical Fuckstorm. It's amazing, and I'm so glad that they are so well received internationally as well. I'm glad that the eyes of the
Yeah.
world are on a band like this, because I'm glad, you know, this is sort of what is sort of representing Australia in a sense, like
Isn't
songwriting
it
like this,
great? And then
music like this.
I feel like they're, and I don't know if this is a good comparison, but I feel like the birthday party of our generation in terms of the way they, I mean, people like them here in Australia, but as soon as the overseas, this is typical of Australian, the music scene, or sorry, the listening public. Once they got that kudos from the international market, like the British or the Europeans, it's like, wow, we should really dig into these guys. Bands like the Drones and like they're huge. Like I remember now, I think they were huge in France, for example. So as soon as you get that tick of approval from the overseas market, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, let's let's go watch these guys. Let's go start listening to them. But to me, Tropical Foxhome is one, along with Emil and the Sniffers. They're one of the most important bands in the Australian music scene right now. And I'm not great with the new music from coming out of Australia. I'm stuck in my 70s and 60s world most of the time, and 90s actually, stuck in 90s a lot too. But when that bands like these come along, you gotta embrace it. You gotta dig in. And yeah, this band excites me to no end, and I cannot wait to see them live again.
I
And
guess
hopefully, you get to see them live too.
I'm
So
very looking forward to it, because yeah, the new album, is the new album out, or am I?
yeah, it's out. It's
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah.
I've been sort of a little bit slack with new releases lately, because I'm working through my list from the start of the year still. I've got a long way to go. But I guess, speaking of exciting musicians, and speaking of that sort of 60s and 70s era as well, we've got Joni
Mm.
Mitchell next, and Help Me. So this was, I mean, I think this was one of her biggest singles. But
But
why
yeah,
is it that Help Me really sticks with you?
sorry, Courtney. Thinking about Courtney Barnes. Joni Mitchell is another one of those artists that it took me a long time to understand, just to get her music. It's not because it's not great; it's fantastic. But I don't think I had the sophistication in her music. I don't. It was until I started digging into the jazz side of things, and learning more about all the musicians that she's played with, that she plays in her albums. That's when I started to really understand what a genius she is. And Cord and Spark was that album that I go, wow, this is this this artist is in another level. She and this the sophistication in her music, um, and a lot of it I didn't get from a standpoint of what I normally would write, but that was inspiring to me because I felt like I learned a lot from listening to her, and then I loved reading through liner notes and seeing all the musicians that guested in her album. For example, Corden Spark had Robbie Robertson from the band, it had David Crosby, had Larry Carlton, is one of my favorite guitar players, and that just made me more excited and made me want to really listen to the album in a deeper level. And yeah, from there, that kind of Corden Spark kind of started my journey into the other harder to listen, but the ones that are not so pop and mainstream albums of hers. And yeah, and she's a fantastic guitar player. I love her voice. And Help Me, I think, captures all that. And it's also joyful and lyrically as well. I feel like Cotton Spark also feels like a transition record for her. There's a lot of it's very introspective. A lot of her questioning decisions, questioning the people she's met in this record. Uh, then she found who she truly was after that. And I'm just making an assumption here, but we kind of base a lot of things on what we read people, our artists write. And yeah, from there I was fully in love with Joni Mitchell.
Oh, she's a true, like a true icon. I mean, there's a reason that she's, won so many awards and been inducted in the Rock and Roll
Mm.
Hall of Fame. I'm glad that she
Yeah.
gets that sort of mainstream kudos, but I'm also so glad that songs like "Help Me" exist, because they are such
Mm.
brilliant songs.
Yeah.
And you, this is another very labored analogy. You mentioned an amazing guitarist, like she's an amazing guitarist. I would like to hear
Mm.
her play this next song. I don't think she will because we're talking about amazing guitarists. We've got Stevie Ray Vaughan and
Yeah.
Texas Flood. So I mean, I feel like we've also been talking about some of the musicians we've lost way too early, but Stevie Ray
Mm.
Vaughan is a great example of that. But
Way too early.
Texas Flood is also it's a bit of an epic, really, isn't it?
Mm. Well, I've always considered myself a guitarist first and foremost. That's the first album. Sorry, the first album. That's the first instrument that sucked me into music because I wanted to be a great guitar player, and I wanted Eric Clapton, Hendrix, Jimmy Page, those guys, Jeff Beck. They were all my earliest guitar influences, and that created my love for blues. And then it helped me dig deeper to the past. The older artists like Buddy Guy and Elmore James and Robert Johnson and all those kind of cats. But when I first heard Stevie Ray Vaughan, it was the first time where I heard where his guitar playing made me really emotional. There's something about his playing, you can feel it. It's coming from another place. And I think a lot of people have that experience when they listen, when they finally get Stevie Ray Vaughan. He'll play from his solos, the way he just rips into his solos, like in Texas Flood, or his pop side in Pop Pride and Joy. But then he'll play things like Riviera Paradise or Lenny from his self-titled album. And wow, there's something deep happening with this guy. And then his story afterwards, how he recovered from alcoholism and drug addiction, and released his last record. Then he passed away. It was just wow. So it was more, besides the technical prowess that he has, but it's just more. He was the first guitar player that really touched me on an emotional level. He really got me from that perspective.
And I suppose I should ask as well. Like, obviously, Texas Flood is a great song, but have you ever heard the original version of Texas Flood?
Yeah, who was it by? Was it
Some
who
Larry
was it? Albert
Davis.
King? Larry Davis. Yeah, I have actually. I have heard the original version, and it's not. I think it's probably a safer version. uh, and he's a Texan. Stevie Ray. So there's a sound. There's a Texas guitar sound. There's a Texas blues sound, and driven by that Strat especially. And yeah, again, another song that he makes his own. So like Hallelujah with Jeff Buckley, people think it's his, but it's Leonard Cohen's. But Texas Flood, it's Larry's, but
Yeah,
it's
everyone thinks
made
of Stevie Ray
famous.
Vaughan.
Everyone sees Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I think that's a great thing, because he's made it his own, and that's part of his legacy. Now that's one of his big calling cards, Texas Flood.
And so, I guess speaking of calling cards as well, we do have another band that we've mentioned a couple of times here, and talking about amazing songwriters and everything. And we've got Wilco with Misunderstood.
Mm.
So there are so many amazing songs you could pick from Wilco. I mean, on every album, there are so many amazing songs. So how do you circle in on Misunderstood?
I think that album's from Being There. It was Wilco, uh, like a lot of the acts I love, marries a lot of the things that I love in songs and songwriting. There's that big star element to around that time. There was a big star element to their writing. There was obviously that old countryside. And then they started to experiment around with sounds around that time. And a lot of that, I think, was driven by Jay Bennett, who's sadly gone. And I started to see, and Misunderstood was one of those songs where I started to hear that experimentation starting to happen with Wilco. People think it started with oh god, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, but it didn't. To me, it started around then. They started to play around with sounds, and Misunderstood is one of those songs that I think kickstarted all that. And then I always have this memory of, or every time I see them when they play Misunderstood, it is so intense, especially towards the end. I want to thank you all for nothing, nothing. And I think the thing is, I think that's a song. Yeah. So yeah, and if you watch also the documentary on them, you see them playing that song as well. And it says a lot. It's a very honest song that's coming out of Jeff. Again, probably his insecurities around that time as well. So that song just spoke to me in so many different levels, and it began to me what Wilco is now. That album, that song's just part of it. So I could have chosen any song from that album, really.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I think Wilco might actually almost be like one of the most chosen artists in this podcast, whether it be for like the artists, the albums, the songs. People just love Wilco, and I can't blame them at all. They're a stellar band.
they're a musicians band, musicians band. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's I feel like that every time that Wilco have like released an album, you're in for a good time. Even if it's a bad album, that's still better than most artists' best albums. So you're always in for a good
No, I
time.
agree. I mean, the last few albums didn't. I mean, it didn't pull me in like the way their more classic albums were. But still, like you said, their mediocre album is is up there with any other band's albums, you know. So.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like that it's a good place for me to say, Bryan Estepa, I want to say thank you so very much for your time today and for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tyler. It's been a great chat, going deep into these songs and my songs. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, no obligation, but I'm forever grateful if you do. Of course, I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. And I've also got a blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's TYLERJENKE/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. That's where you can find a list of all the songs chosen by my guest each week, along with a playlist of all the songs chosen thus far. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can throw me a few dollars to keep this podcast running if you feel so inclined. I also need to thank Bryan Estepa for spending his time with me this week for the podcast, and I also need to thank Chris Familton for helping to organise this chat as well. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.